Hello, everyone. Welcome to Risk. This is the show where people tell true stories they never thought they'd dare to share in public. And like we've been saying, this is the family is the theme of tonight's show in honor of Thanksgiving. I am constantly surprised. You're probably aware that the show is also a podcast. We record this tonight. And on the podcast, we feature some of the live stories from these shows as well as radio stories. But I'm constantly surprised the way that the show keeps opening up things in my own life. For example, I've been asked to go to Amsterdam next week to speak about storytelling at the International Documentary Film Festival. And the guy who runs the festival said, "Oh, by the way, I heard your episode called Kevin Goes to Kink Camp." Someone had kind of dared me a couple months ago to go to this kink camp, and I had a very interesting experience and told about it on the podcast. So this guy in Amsterdam said, "Look, here in Amsterdam, we have some fabulous BDSM clubs, and I can show you where to go." So this year is going to be a very, very different sort of Thanksgiving for me, I do believe. I will not be with my family this year. I might just be in a corner getting peed on. But you know, every family has a bunch of stories that they break out every time they're all together, right? They tell them and they retell them, and everyone's got different versions. They disagree about the details, and this is one that comes from my clan. I come from a long line of assless men. My father, his brothers, their sons, my brothers. If you look at my backside, you will see that I don't so much have a ballast there as what I prefer to call a lack thereof. And I used to be rather concerned about this. But one year when I was in high school, my mother and my father and I, we went to Edisto, South Carolina, which is a place that it's very rare that you still find these places in America where there's actually more locals there than there are tourists. You know, it's still very quiet, and it's very, very, very southern. People are very salt of the earth there. So once we arrived in Edisto, it's about 1988, I'm about 18 years old, we were starving. So we wanted to go to a restaurant right off the beach, and we got in there and we were like, oh my God, everyone had the same idea today, because the place was packed. So the hostess kind of wedges us into the middle of this completely packed restaurant. Now my father is a very fat man. And he always has been, you know. He loves his beer. He loves the fat on the edges of the steak more than the steak. And people always think of him as kind of being a little bit like Santa Claus, only with a red beard. So we wedge in there, and he's just kind of, you know, getting it because he's right behind him. There's this little girl, about a 12-year-old girl, in a wheelchair. So he's kind of bumping up against her and wedging down into a seat. And then as soon as we're seated, Dad has to stand up again. He's like, "Oh, God damn it, I just have to get this sweatshirt off." So he wedges himself back up and hits the girl in the wheelchair again. And he starts trying to get this sweatshirt off. Well, it was too tight on him with his big bulbous belly, and he starts yanking around at it. And as he starts this process, I begin to notice that he's taking the white undershirt that's underneath the sweatshirt up along with the sweatshirt, right? So my mom starts going, Paul, and he's just like, "God, shut up, Carol, I just gotta take this sweatshirt off." And he's pulling it up, and more of his belly is being exposed. And then many things happened within the next few seconds. He's pulling and pulling, and finally he does manage to get it up around his face, but it gets stuck there. Now he's kind of blindfolded himself, and he's managed to kind of tangle his arms above his head too. So his belly is sticking out there in the middle of the restaurant for everyone to see, and he just starts like thrashing around like some sort of alien monster with tentacles at everyone. And everyone's looking like, what on earth is going on? And with all the thrashing and wriggling, my dad must have temporarily forgot that a belt is not very useful for an assless man. In our case, you really are only safe with suspenders. But Dad always hated suspenders, so while he's wriggling around and my mom's like, Paul, and he's like, God damn it, Kara, I just gotta get this off. His shorts hit the ground. And he's got these old Fruit of the Loom tighty-whities. They're all stretched out and full of holes. So he's standing there in the middle of the restaurant, like blindfolded, wearing nothing now but his shoes and his underwear, and everyone's looking. And there's a man at the table with the girl in the wheelchair. Now, this guy was pure Southern, like hardcore, like not a very chipper guy, right? He just jumps up and he's like, what the hell is going on here? Now, in fairness, it did appear that my dad was starting a dominant and submissive scene right there in the middle of lunch. But my mom and I jump up, we're like, this is an accident, it's an accident. And my dad starts to realize what's going on, and he just quickly, I've never seen him move so quickly as this, gets his shorts up and his shirt back down, and he wedges himself back into a seat. And then all three of us just kind of start staring at our plates like we're gonna learn something there. And we realized that the man behind us was still standing, still making sure that this is really and truly over, and then he sits down. And it was just clear that no one in the restaurant thought that this was at all funny, which is why the three of us thought it was hilarious. We spent like the next half hour just in tears, our stomachs hurting, because we're trying to stifle this laughter for the longest time because we know it's annoying the people around us, but we just couldn't help it. So it gives me a special satisfaction to tell this story tonight because, my mom, she has a version of this story. And my dad, he has a version of this story, and I always have to defend my version. But of the three of us, I'm the one with a podcast. Thank you.